Welcome to the Reach Out Radio Broadcast Podcast, Internet Radio Video Experience and Experiment here at the Voice 17104 in beautiful Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. With me in the studios, as always, is my friend and compatriot in social justice, Mr. Bill Jamison.
Hello.
As I like to call him, the Taco King, the king of tacos. Is that is
Hey,
that an apt is that an apt
that's
descriptor?
wonderful. That's me. All right.
All right,
Hey,
all right, good stuff.
I'll throw a plug out to Taco Mitiera to make the best tacos in Harrisburg.
Yeah, no, I highly recommend them. They're quite good and inexpensive, and they're right here in the neighborhood. And you tell they are a business who is just very neighborhood based. They probably live around here. I don't know them, but
They're around here. I
yeah,
know that, and they relate around here. And it's not your Taco Bell taco. I don't want to sound disparaging to Taco Bell,
I do.
but here we are. We're talking about people who are authentic. We're talking about a Mexican restaurant run by Mexicans who catered to Mexicans in a diverse area of Harrisburg, where a lot of people appreciate Mexican food by Mexicans.
And where a lot of people know the difference. They know what's
Yeah,
good and
absolutely.
what's not.
Every day is fresh and every day it's plentiful. The
Yep.
prices, blue collar prices, ladies and gentlemen. We get a good daily, fresh, hearty blue collar meal.
Absolutely. And I saw some stuff on Taco Bell when they first started that actually looked kind of authentic, kind of looked like, actual burritos and tacos that, were kind of Mexican. But now, they're offering lots of weird stuff. They partner with Doritos. They offer Doritos tacos. They offer, double decker burritos with cheese laced in between the taco shell and the soft shell. It is definitely Americanized
Mm.
Mexican food, and really, it's barely Mexican food anymore.
No, that doesn't sound very Mexican.
No, it's
I bet they don't have no Viva Zapata posters on the wall at Taco Bell.
no. They got some Viva Bezos posters, or some Viva the owner of Yum Foods, I believe is their owner. Yum,
Yum.
who
Is
was a
that who they are?
subsidiary of a big corporation like Unilever, one of those
Uh,
big ones.
wow.
Yeah, you've seen that chart where it's the big conglomerations that
Wow.
own all the little companies. I'm certain they're one of them
Wow.
because Yum Foods is huge. Taco Bell and oh god, KFC, a lot of other ones too.
We're gonna get to a point where everything, maybe every other institution, the food industry is going to be owned by one individual. The water industry is going to be owned by one individual.
Mhm.
The electric is going to be produced maybe by two people.
On Parks and Recreation, their last series or their last season, they were saying, just in a joking way, that it was like Chipotle, Exxon, and another company, one of the six remaining corporations in America, because there had been so many mergers and
Uh
so much
huh. Yeah.
monopolization. And
Where do we
honestly,
get French? Who's that? Time Warner now and AT&T. I
that's
mean,
just too
is
much.
that a mega corporation or what?
And it just eliminates those few markets where there is still competition.
Yeah, well, absolutely no such thing as
Competition with
competition.
two companies.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
no, that aspect of it all is gone. And now, Tesla Bezos, he's coming up with a whole new notion. After I make my billions, I'll buy everything back. He's going to privatize. He's not going to be a public company anymore. He says, and of course the stock went up. But he's pulling away from being a public company and becoming a private company again.
wow.
Yeah, he's
How is that
tired.
even possible?
Oh, you
How
just have to
can
have enough money to buy everything back.
and I hear Apple is $1 trillion corporation
Well, but
now.
they got money like that. I mean,
They keep their money in money. Like they just keep a ton of cash on
yeah.
hand. They have billions and billions on hand.
Well, if Bezos buys his own company back, it will be the biggest buyback ever in history. You know, and Wonder Boy just might pull it off.
Oh, he's Wonder Boy.
I can't see any other person who's got the characteristics that meet that definition, but Bezos.
Ah, Zuckerberg.
Oh well, Zuckerberg. Now he's kind of a wooden copy.
That's the answer. I think because Bezos is not really the most charismatic and bold leader there is.
No, he's actually. I can see him pulling out because he seems like more of a loner. I mean, he actually should have been in that car that shot out. Where's it going, to Mars or someplace? To the sun. That's where it's going.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have mind being in it.
Well,
Yeah.
we will forward our suggestion on shooting Jeff Bezos into the sun to Jeff Bezos and see what he thinks about it.
See, yeah.
I'm not sure he'll be too into it, but he might be.
Hey,
He could be a pioneer, the first man shot into the sun.
tell him he'll be all alone and everything he sees around him is his. Yeah, you go for that.
Yeah, he probably would. He could stake out all the real estate on the sun.
Right.
Of course, he probably would realize that that would mean his demise, but
It means that he joins the solar system. He joins the universe. He joins the cosmos. Those elements, those atoms that make up his body will become significant in that they will universalize themselves. They will spread out all over the universe and become just a part of existence.
well, let's hope that has no adverse effect on existence and we don't start living in the Bezos verse where all the stars
Uh,
are on 10-day contracts that have to go in a certain rate and make a certain production quota, else they are cast out of the sky.
yeah. Well, starlight, star bright. The Bezos star I see tonight.
Yeah.
I think he would be a great part of the universe.
Well, better than he is now, at least.
So anyway, we're
Yeah.
talking about universal things, and we're talking about the Earth and getting away from the Earth in this case. But it's going to come to a point where the Earth is probably a good place to get away from as it gets hotter and hotter. It's pretty hot out there in California right now.
Oh, yeah. It's very hot in many places. And
19 places.
yeah.
In California, I mean, it's hot all over the world right now. Portugal, you got temperatures of 115, 122 degrees. And you have the resultant forest fires, and you have 44 at least people who are hurt and injured in Portugal. And you got forest fires happening other places in the world due to heat. The heat produces drought. The drought produces dry air. Dry air needs only a spark. And the heat that's contained in the earth itself continues to heat up the environment around it, making the fire itself hotter. As a matter of fact, I've been listening. I've been listening to the firefighters in California. You know, before this fire in Mendocino, a couple of weeks ago when it first started, it was talked about by one fire chief there who said that, and he was backed up by other fire chiefs and people who talked about other fires as well, that there are new phenomena taking place with respect to fires themselves.
Well, that's surprising. See, I was under the impression that fire had existed from time immemorial and was simply a natural process and that we wouldn't see anything new in the world of fire.
It's a new fire. You're talking now, for example, about something called a fire tornado. We're talking about where the center of that fire becomes so hot and the heat of the air around it becomes so hot and in it's rising and it's turning. The fire and the heat from that fire itself creates a tornado. a tornado effect. It is the same as fighting a fire that's being driven by Santa Ana winds, except there are no Santa Ana winds, and the fire itself produces its own driving
And to
winds.
me, that sounds like the wide space equivalent of a backdraft just
That go
taking
back,
flight.
that blows you out. I mean,
Yeah, but you got these winds and huh. I
what
mean
these,
the combination of that and the dry tinder
yeah,
and I don't know. I don't know this quality of the air that is more prone to sparks and I don't know like a kinetic
yeah,
quality to the
yeah.
air too.
They said that these fires over the last couple of years have shown them that there is something new going on, and they relate it very, very, very directly to global warming. They relate it to climate change. They relate it to the Earth getting higher, hotter, and hotter. The temperature of the Earth rising every year hotter than it was the year before. A matter of a couple of degrees makes a difference in how much water is in your air. A matter of a couple of degrees makes a heck of a difference in terms of the dryness or the tender, the opportunity for fire to burn dry tinder. You know, there was one firefighter there who said of the Mendocino fire, I have never seen a fire so angry. Angry, he talks about the fire, that the fire itself is in a rage. And these people have fought fires for years.
I don't know how to interpret that. Whether he actually believes like there is a spirit to the fire and it is raging and
Most firemen believe that there's a spirit to the fire.
hmm,
Yeah,
and a lot of Native Americans do and a whole lot of other native
and
peoples
most people who fight fires, whether they
um,
are even straight abstract Americans.
there is that belief in animism in a lot of the I don't know the pagan and the Wiccan religions too,
Hmm.
and that's also not to say that Christianity doesn't believe in an aliveness to nature because I don't think that precludes it. Maybe the way it's taught today, but I don't think it's precluded in really any spiritual tradition. I think maybe in our modern scientific worldview, it's looked at questioningly, but throughout history, that's not something that was considered outlandish or
No,
ridiculous.
well, it's not. If you are a person who is in every day or semi every day or however it is for a firefighter contact with this force, you know, these fires they seem to have personalities of their own to a firefighter, and they seem to fight back or retreat to a firefighter. You know, he seems to be up against something that is, as you say, alive. And now they are talking about something that is not only alive, but angry and in a rage. And they're telling us that that is different from the fires that they experience, and they have vast experience from their experiences in the past. I believe them. I listen to them. We're talking about a fire right now that's bigger than the city of Los Angeles. Bigger. The area covered by this fire, still expanding, is already bigger than the area of the city of Los Angeles. And they are telling us, these fire professionals, that they expect that this is only the beginning of the trend. We're seeing a new normal. We're seeing a new trend. The funny thing was, and this isn't funny, but I saw this report and I listened to these fire chiefs on CBS on one of their reports. And the reporter who was doing it, after the discussion with these firefighters, he summed up the story by saying that the future offered more risk because more and more people were going to be building homes in the forest. And
My question would be, why?
well, my question was, what forest?
That's true too.
I mean, when you talk about this being a trend, a new thing, a coming way, something that's going to be worse next year than it is this year, 50 years from now, the question isn't whether or not there will be a greater risk from homes in the forest. The question is whether or not there will be a forest. The question legitimately is whether or not there will be a California. The air right now is unbreathable for these people fighting these fires, these people living around these fires. The air right now is becoming unbreathable. What is going to happen with that future? And why is CBS so ignorant of their own story that they don't see the seriousness of what they are reporting?
I think there are two interesting ways where we diverged on that. Where you said what forest, and that's absolutely a valid idea. That there at that point there may be no forest left. But even if there is a forest, why are we still choosing to live in it?
Mm-hmm.
Firstly, we know the dangers with all this fires and all these raging fires, but also there's other places to build. There are places out in the open, there are places in suburbs and cities. There are plenty of open places. Why do we yet again choose to infringe on nature and eliminate yet another natural habitat, belying the very few that are left?
That's like similar to those people who build their houses on a cliff and then the cliff falls away. You've seen those houses?
Yeah, that's like people who build their vacation home on the Outer Banks.
Mm,
Or really, honestly, if you're building, I don't know, I would say within 30 miles of the coast anywhere at this point, I would say you are taking quite a risk
yeah.
because there's very good chance in the next 50 years your home is no longer going to be above water. And we speak of these sea level changes as minuscule and ineffective, and they're like, oh, it's only going to go up an inch this year. And just geologically, that is profound. There's a profound
Oh
rise in
man, are
sea
you kidding
levels.
me?
Just like the we see that the CO2 raises a little bit every
Mm-hmm.
year, but we are not considering that it is at the highest level it's been in 800,000 years.
Mm-hmm. And rising.
800,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
I would, all right, I don't know the definition of an eon, but let's call it a million years.
That's hardly an eon, but yeah,
Well, all right.
that's just a million years.
Well, I don't know. What do you consider an
An
eon?
eon, well, way. I mean, it's
E-
uh,
okay, there's an eon and there's an epoch.
so, yeah,
Which
okay.
is bigger?
The eon,
I- Okay, then let's say a million years is an epoch.
okay.
This is nearly an entire epoch that CO2 has not been this high.
Mm-hmm.
What?
But
It's clearly because of us. There is
uh,
no other reason. We affect climate. We inevitably affect climate, and we're going to get at this in a few minutes. But Fukushima, nuclear power, nuclear waste, we affect ecosystems, and that affects climate too.
yeah, here's the thing. Look, I don't think it's even worthwhile discussing anymore whether or not we cause climate change. I don't even think it's worthwhile discussing anymore whether or not we affect the earth, the climate, and all of that. I mean, this era that we have now renamed is the era on which man has caused the changes of the earth. I mean, we have an absolute science name for what this time is because of our effectiveness in changing things.
The Anthropocene,
Yeah,
the Anthropocene era.
yeah. That's for real. I mean, that happened for a reason. It's no longer a question of whether or not we do and have. Yeah. Now there are some people who, for their own monetary reasons, want to say stupid stuff and confuse people, and there are people still willing to be confused. But the fact of the matter is that the ice is melting, that Greenland is exposed, that Iceland is exposed. Is that when you get to the permafrost, the CO2 that's stored in the permafrost is then released, and we're no longer talking about the kind of rise that you see and find to be catastrophic in and of itself. But where we're going is beyond catastrophe.
And they have seen mammoth tusks and all
Mm,
this biological matter being released, and that's releasing methane as well.
yes, and methane is worse than the CO2.
And as we have seen, and there's just a study, I didn't get into it much this week, but I saw that the currents that affect the melting of the Arctic glacier are much more effectual than we had thought. They are melting at a much higher. I mean, we knew it was melting at a higher rate than expected, but the actual warming currents in the sea are melting it at a much higher rate.
And because it melts at a higher rate, things speed up.
Yeah, that's why so
What
many of
happens
our
to the oxygen level, for example,
yeah,
in the ocean?
so many of our models and numbers are just built on this linear progression.
Right.
We're not linear.
No,
It is
no, geometric at least.
geometric.
But I'm not even sure that those kinds of things apply, uh, because we have no idea of the multiplicity. Like, how much methane does it take to make something? You know what I'm saying? Uh, Give us another degree, you know. And if it takes like 5 years to get that much methane now, it's only going to take 1 year to get that much methane tomorrow. You know, so what do we have? What formula do we have that can predict those things? And what does it matter? You know, you get to a point of recognizing a direction that you're going and you know it's catastrophic. You don't have to get to the end of it. You know, you change course. You don't have to get to the end and make the crash. You know, when you see the red warning light, you stop, or you get on a different highway.
But
Or
also with this, as we approach the end, there's going to be nothing left. There is no magic way out. And we see Bezos and we see Musk and we see Branson and we see all these multi billionaire investors, capitalist moguls, mega egotists trying to, instead of, and we'll get to this a little later too, building schools that surpass imagination and potential. Instead of that, we see them trying to look for a way out. We see them looking for a path to the next place that they can cultivate and exploit. And one thing I've always said, I've always been a proponent
mm,
of interstellar travel, of
mm,
traveling the stars. I think it's a really cool idea. But with a few caveats. As you always say, we got to get our stuff right here first before we even set out for anywhere else. Else, we're just going to
it's a waste of time.
be the same as we were here.
We, okay.
But also, we, I don't know, there are just so many other things that are so much more beneficial that you could put your billions and billions and Bezos's $120 billion. I think he probably just made $1 billion today. Congratulations to him.
But all of those things are just excuses to keep things as they are. You know, no brakes on the train. You know, no tracks ahead. But we still don't want to change. And part of that, a lot of that has to do with the leadership. They don't want to change because of greed. But it also has to do with us, the common folk. You know, if they say to you, you have to stop driving your gas guzzler tomorrow, you know,
Nah.
it's
I
they
mean,
say
we
to
have
you,
we have mass shootings and people are unwilling to give up their bazookas.
okay,
Not their pistols or
right,
their rifles,
I know,
but their bazookas, their
yeah, right,
flamethrowers, their tanks.
yes, okay, okay.
Just saying.
We are in deep trouble because of our leadership, yes, but also because of our reluctance to give up any sort of modicum of comfort. I was talking to a group today, and this is a wonderful group of young people, the Salton Light Youth Ministry, which is doing some work for us this week. It's part of their mission project, and they are very smart, energetic young people led by youthful elders, older people. I can't use the word elder because they're not nearly old enough to be elders in that sense, but older than the kids.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, and we were talking about a couple of these issues, and these things, came up. But what it was amazing to me is like the amount of obfuscation, the amount of information we're not even giving to our kids. The kids being in school and not learning that they are in a situation that's going to require some real drastic life changes, social changes, style changes, how we live changes, not casually, not over a period of time,
We had time for
but
that.
abruptly.
There was a time when that would have been okay.
Okay.
There was a time 50 years ago, I would say 50 is safe, where we could
Yeah,
have
yeah.
changed the way that we grew and used energy and used technology that before we started emitting all this carbon, where we could have veered into a more balanced and mindful path. But we can't anymore. We simply can't. It must be abrupt. And
And
it
we're
just
cheating
seems
them.
unlikely.
We're cheating them. Yeah, we're cheating them when we say that they're going to build homes 50 years from now in the forest. you know, we're cheating
Yeah.
them when we don't tell them why.
And we
We got
are
blue buckets.
we're also cheating the bears of the forest
Oh,
and the
yeah.
deer
Oh,
and the
why can't you?
rabbits and the
You know,
fish.
because I get into this thing about us being such egotists that we don't even recognize any other animal on this earth. And we have a story down here about the orca. We have a story down here about there only being 75, 75 southern resident orcas in the world left. 75. And we're in the process of getting ready to kill them.
Indeed. Let me say this before we shift to that one. The fire is 513 square miles. That is the size of Los
And
Angeles
growing.
and growing. And something that is pertinent as well is they are using child, let's call them teenagers who have been arrested. They're using kids from juvenile detention centers to fight these fires against their will, not giving them a choice. They're marching them into the fires and making them
Mm.
risk their life. It's one thing to choose to fight a fire and to risk your life as an adult. And I think it's a brave occupation. I think that's really something. But to force young people against their will to risk their lives is demonic.
And they use the prison population in California as forest fires regularly. You know that. I'm not talking about the juveniles, but I'm talking about the male population. They even train prisoners to be firefighters while they're in jail to fight fires, and they take them out to fight fires, and that's what they do.
This always harkens me back to the Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's a good illustration.
yeah.
It's a little
Right,
hokey, I guess, but
but
I like it.
right. They're
Frank
drinking
Darabont
beer on
knows
the
what he's
roof,
doing.
and
Yeah,
they get a chance to get out and drink a beer in the forest if you're willing to put out with a fire
maybe.
and unbreathable air.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, you're looking at that. You want to talk about an issue? We're getting ready on the 21st of August to have a nationwide prison strike. One of the issues is slavery in the prisons, and that means that these firefighters out there in California who are in prison, they have an issue that they're going to have to face, and that is whether or not they want to continue, being fighter slaves or go on strike with the rest of the prisoners. And chances are they'll be on strike as these fires continue.
As the popular song said, we don't need no water. Let the mother lover burn. And I feel like that is going to be what they say
Hey,
as they are forced into this indentured servitude that could easily cost them their lives.
yeah. And now you're talking about juveniles, huh?
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the people who know, the fire chiefs and the firefighters say that these fires are unstoppable. Unstoppable. That is their conclusion. The fire will burn itself out in a month or so, and their job will be to try to keep it as contained as is possible. But The fire itself is unstoppable, and that's a heck of a position for mankind to put themselves in.
Fire is unstoppable, just as so many fires have been throughout time, just as volcanoes are unstoppable, just as earthquakes are unstoppable. And as we have lost our reverence and fear of these great and humongously powerful natural processes, we put our species at risk. We put our entire existence as a human race at risk when we ignore the principles that lead to global climate change, that lead to the depletion of oxygen, that lead to the pollution of our air and water, and that lead to the potential for these fires raging like these men say, as no fires have before. When we ignore the destructive and powerful potential of nature, we do it to our own peril.
Well, we're done. Ruthie, one of the
Wow,
ladies in that
that's rough.
leading that group that I was talking about,
Mm-hmm.
the Salt and Light Youth Ministry, when we were eating tacos and we were talking, what one of the questions she asked me, was in looking at the young kids and what I thought their chances were, and I said none.
It's, it's grim. It's grim, Bill.
But I can't go any other place. Any way of looking at it reasonably, objectively, there's no way out of this. Where do you want to start? With the fish going away? With the trees burning away? With no oxygen being in the air? With the air being full of methane and carbon dioxide? With the heat being unbearable? With there not being any air conditioning? With the waters and rivers evaporating? You know, where do you want to go? Where you could see a ray of hope. You could go only one place, and that is that mankind is making a tremendous effort, as we did say, for example, going to the moon or rebuilding Europe after World War II or something. Well, we put out a great deal of energy and a great deal of focus and a great deal of effort to have a thing happen.
Mm-hmm.
And if that has not happened already, and it does not happen within the next 4 hours, I will stick with my opinion that there is no hope. Sorry.
And you were saying how much obfuscation there was and just hiding of it. And as you said in your byline, heads in the sand, as I said in my topic, are we somehow, I don't know, biologically predisposed to
Yeah, that was an
ignore
interesting
our fate?
statement there.
No, it was a question. Someone wrote a book to that effect. If we
Huh.
were, in fact, we survived so long as a species because of our ability to ignore impending doom and to
Hmm.
keep going in the face of it,
Uh huh. Uh
or,
huh.
to try to innovate in the face of that sort of, inevitable.
Those kinds of things that we've faced in the
Yeah,
past, you know,
yeah.
uh, but we didn't really face the ice age. I mean, we were sparsely on the earth. I mean,
Well, thoughts on that, but I don't know. I think there's some terribly strong cultures back around the time of the Ice Age, and they're finding
I'm
more
sure.
archaeological evidence to
Hmm.
keep proving that even
But
10,
they
12,000
weren't
years
they weren't
back.
exactly growth periods, though.
I don't know enough to say, but we'll keep going.
Yeah,
I think human history is pretty
I think
intricate.
the ice age is probably a lot easier to overcome than what we have coming in terms of what we call this. What's the opposite of the ice age? The heat age, the turd age, the hell age, the
Fire
Hades
age.
age, the fire age.
Yeah.
You know, what was there was a poem at one time whether or not the world will end by fire or ice, and as for me, either will suffice. So it matters not, but I think that the heat is going to be really a bad way to go. I mean, we're complaining about the heat every day as it is, and these new rain patterns that we're dealing with, and we're getting miserable already.
Oh yeah. It's a poem entitled "Fire and Ice" by Robert Frost. It
Uh,
goes, "Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to know that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice.
Right on.
So he's saying
Yeah,
either way, because both reflect characteristics of the human spirit.
yeah, right on. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So these orcas,
The orcas, all 75 of them, are in danger.
there are a certain specific type of orca. Uh,
The southern resident orca,
yeah,
as opposed to other types of orca, who are also endangered in their own ways.
I mean they are large, slow sea mammals in a world where there are fast ships and boats and other technological, you know,
And where they depend
interrupters.
on they depend on hearing. Do they depend on sonar
I'm not sure.
uh, in order to hunt and live? 400 ships. 'Cause let's talk about what we're talking about. We're talking about Trudeau, the Canadian, the man who became the is he a prime minister?
Yes, I would describe him as the great liberal.
The great liberal.
The great
That's
liberal.
how he ran. And then he became this guy who purchased the mountain pipeline. What's it called?
Trans Mountain
Trans
Pipeline.
Mountain Pipeline.
See, I don't know. I think that fits, though, especially the vision of neoliberalism.
Mm. Neoliberals are not liberals. I don't know what that, because the things that they stand for are not really liberal things. But yeah,
I think neoliberal just takes it from the idea of liberalism, but adds that business and capitalistic
but they
aspect to
also
it.
add this corporate world control stuff and
Hmm.
anti-Russian stuff and pro-war stuff and taking over other countries stuff.
That's why I got to shudder when people are talking about Joe Biden running for president on the Democratic ticket in
Mm,
2020.
mm,
And it's no question. People know what they're getting, people know
mm,
who he is,
mm.
and it's a purposeful act.
Yeah.
It's no mistake.
Okay. With Trudeau, this guy, whatever we want to call him, he purchased this Trans Mountain Pipeline to ensure, because the company that was doing it originally backed out of it because of the protests of environmentalists and the rest of us who did not want to see this thing happen. And he bought it with the taxpayers of Canada's money in order to ensure that it does. And what it's going to do then is give us a whole new tar sands oil. 400 tankers a year passing through the strait between Vancouver and Washington State, a very small area, where these orcas live. Were they have called home for how many thousands of years, I wonder?
Many,
You
many
know,
thousand.
and we are going to run these tankers with this terribly toxic oil through their home grounds. First of all, creating all kinds of noise pollution that disallows them to hunt as they need to hunt in order to live and survive, which is going to be effective enough in terms of causing their demise. But number two, I, I grew up, I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. When I was a kid, I used to walk down to the Delaware River, and where I saw the Delaware River, where it came through Philadelphia, you would not take off your clothes and strip down and jump in the water for a swim or a bath. It was so dirty, so oily. There was so much stuff floating in that water. There was some question as to whether or not there was actually, really, truly, at what level, at what depth, that you would encounter real water. It was terrible. And that's what I saw as a kid and identify it as a river. You know,
And I'm not sure if it's still like that. I'm not familiar with the state of New York City, but the East River was always said to be this terrible, muck filled, polluted river. But we need look no further than the Susquehanna,
yeah,
which is one of the top five
yeah,
polluted rivers in
yeah,
this country.
yeah. But I look now. I lived in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Ah, the Fire
okay,
River.
yeah,
Mm.
the Cuyahoga caught on fire. You know,
That's interesting. In the native tongue, that actually said Fire River.
Fire River.
No, it
No,
didn't, but it should have. It should have been prophetic in saying so.
Cuyahoga. Yeah, what does it mean?
I don't know. I'll look it up.
Uh, at any rate, we're talking about running 400 tankers through this little strait between Vancouver and Washington State. And what do you think 400 tankers a year carrying this toxic oil leaking into that small area is going to do to that pristine place where they have lived for these 1,000 years?
Let's take it even if it never leaks, even if somehow magically there's
But they
never
always
a leak.
leak.
These 400 immense tankers, and you've seen these tankers, we're talking Exxon Valdez plus.
Hmm.
We're talking huge, huge not naval, but nautical vessels, these huge ships. And they are large and they are loud and they are disruptive and they're not gonna turn and change direction for some orcas. Not that they
Yeah,
could.
the
And
orcas are
they go
done.
deep into the
Yeah, yeah, the orcas are
strait
done.
too.
But please don't allow people to walk away ever not believing that you can run tankers without spillage, or not believe that you can run pipelines without spillage.
Hmm.
Those things do not happen.
Right.
You know, where they told that lie right here in Pennsylvania, where the nuns are still fighting the pipeline, we already have suits against those same companies for contaminating people's wells. You know, it might be a small thing for you if you're some kind of pipeline country company, and you might pay somebody a couple $1,000s, but you have destroyed somebody's life. You have destroyed somebody's farm when you take away the water. You know, it's done. Our family has been living for generations, and that happens here in Pennsylvania. That's been living on a farm for generations suddenly can't use the water in the stream or their wells.
Oh, and I'm not sure if you're talking specifically about or not the woman who was arrested on her own land that she
Yeah, how about
owned
that?
for protesting the Mariner East 2 pipeline that was going to be built through her
Mm-hmm.
land. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure of the
Yeah,
name, but
I know who
she was
you're
on her own
talking
land
about.
at the
Yeah,
time.
right, right.
And there's this sort of reverence in this country for private property, and like your land is your land, but when push comes to shove, when it's for the economic interest of a corporation or of the state, your land is their land and their land is their land, and you're out of luck.
And you go to jail for standing up for your land and for your family's place.
Not even violently.
In,
It wasn't even violent. It might have been obstructionist, but it
yeah.
wasn't violent.
Well, how about the nuns? I mean, what did they do violent? Could you imagine a violent nun? I mean,
Well, we met Sister Simone, and
right on.
I think that's about as violent as a nun can
I
get,
love that.
just in terms of
Yeah,
her
yeah,
spirit and her actions. And that's not actually violent. That's
yeah,
just,
no,
vibrant and active,
right,
but still peaceful. I
right.
don't think nuns really get violent, although if we look to South America,
They still, I mean, they get assassinated and
mm,
whatnot for having ideas.
yeah, I don't know. I could imagine nuns taking to violence to protect people under their care, perhaps. If
Yeah,
someone,
okay. I
okay,
mean,
but that's about it. That's about as far as I'll go on that.
okay.
I have no proof of that. Let's just be clear.
Yeah, you never seen it out there, but you could imagine it in abstract.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that is
okay.
just to say that I'm fairly sure the nuns down at the pipeline in Lancaster did not come to blows
No,
with
no,
anyone.
they did not. There was no ever anybody who reported that the nuns picked up a pipe and swung it at somebody. No,
No, of course
no.
not.
Uh, there has never been a shipment of a progressive amount of ships or tankers or pipes or anything that have not leaked and spoiled the water around them. It just has not happened ever. You know, and when they tell you about all the concerns that they have for the environment, et cetera, they won't tell you that it is impossible. It is an impossible guarantee that we are not going to toxify the pristine waters of the world and those water sources that people are find necessary, potable water for life. We're willing we're willing to toxify those waters for profit, which tells us how insane we have become. Water has no monetary equivalent. It is a life giving sustenance. It's a force of life. It's a precious thing for our life sustainability. It has no price tag.
Look at where the major civilizations arose: the Tigris and the Euphrates,
Mm,
the mouth of the Nile, the mouth of the Mississippi River, the mouth of the Amazon River. And all along, it was always just this source of fresh water and nourishment. And it brought it to mind as I read the definition of Cuyahoga, and it means crooked river.
crooked. Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
is, as it said, it a source of life and made a great influence in the Native American peoples. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, it did. It was a source of fish. It was a
Mm-hmm.
source of refreshment. It was a source of, I don't know, just whatever else you'd use water for. And it's so interesting the pattern that we've gone through. That first, as we are much more susceptible to the elements, that we go to rivers to find this sort of natural barrier and protection and life sustenance. But then we get more comfortable and we start using them, and then we turn them into rivers of death.
Slush. Yeah. I was talking to Ruthie again when we were eating tacos and the subject of fish, and I was asking us, not not our leaders, not our congressmen, not our politicians, just us, regular people, to just consider, take a look at who was that guy. Going back in the colonial time, I think he was a Frenchman, Toy or somebody. He came over here and wrote a travel log about the United States, about the colonies. Uh, it was a very important travelogue that was written.
You don't
A
mean
very
Alexis
important.
de Tocqueville, do you?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
him. Uh, one of the statements that he made in there was that the rivers were so full of fish you could walk across them on the backs of fishes. You know, and I say to people, go and read that description. Read the early descriptions of the Europeans, if you must, who came here, since you don't give credibility necessarily to the native people who lived here. Read the Europeans who came here. Read their descriptions of America and the fish. Just take the fish alone. Don't even talk about the forests. Don't talk about the fact that Pennsylvania was penned woods and what that meant.
And we see
You
some
know,
remnants of those forests in the northern part of the
yeah,
state, but they are still nothing was what they
nothing,
were.
nothing, nothing. You know,
And the forest used to be this sense of mystery and wonder and even dread.
yeah.
So just so dark and so wild and so natural. But now,
yeah. Read yourself what this country was, and then take a look around you now and consider that by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. Consider already in 2018, 90% of those fish that they talked about being off of Cape Cod or in the rivers of America are already gone. 90%. Then consider, just from that thought alone, what our future looks like from what we are doing to ourselves and our offspring on this earth.
and in case anyone was wondering, that oil is tar sands oil. That is oil that is treated with the chemicals so it will flow through a pipeline.
It has to be because it's so thick and gooey and stuff. Uh, it can't even flow. It just oozes. It's dirty. It's dirty.
Yeah, it's bad.
But here's my question, how can any human being consider consider, using that stuff, bringing that stuff, mining that stuff, transporting that stuff, processing that stuff, every step of the way is polluting, and then using it to produce CO2. I mean, how can anybody call themselves making an intelligent decision that we would go that way?
I also found it interesting that although Starbucks stopped using the plastic straws, their paper straws were in plastic wrappers.
Yeah.
I think y'all missed the point a little bit. I don't think you really quite understood what the problem was.
Boy, you know what? We stopped using plastic bags in the food pantry downstairs, for example. And I've been looking around every time I go, like to say the supermarket or something.
Mhm.
I decide, not going to use plastic bags. But how much of our packaging? Everything is in plastic.
Look around this studio. Look around. Everything is plastic or some kind of polymer made from
Everything.
plastic or petroleum product. Our camera
Yeah,
is plastic.
everything. Wow.
Cords are plastic.
Plastic, plastic, plastic.
This is aluminum, but undoubtedly the screen's got some plastic in there.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
And if we want to really get into the terribly negative use of materials, our phones, our cellular phones,
oh
are
my goodness.
more than plastic. They are
Yeah.
those rare earth minerals that are both incredibly toxic and that are mined by often the most vulnerable people on earth.
We destroy those people in the process of getting these materials. That's a very unnecessary thing, but that's the way capitalism works. You know,
Don't get me
it,
wrong, phones are cool. I like them.
uh,
Although they also have a pretty deleterious effect on society and community
and
and everything.
we still got the issue of radio waves and whatnot to deal with, out there, which we're not allowing ourselves to explore fully.
Well, that wouldn't be good for profits.
Yeah, you would rather keep our heads in the sand. Then no, we get ready to build towers, every like telephone poles. You know, everything. I'm talking about Wi-Fi. Isn't that what you call it? WI, whatever. Wi-Fi.
We are
We are,
in
huh?
a Wi-Fi field right now.
Hey,
We are at my home.
uh-huh.
Not at your home, I don't think. I don't think
No,
you got the Wi-Fi going. But downstairs in your office you
yeah,
are. And over there in the church, and really most homes probably have it by now. And with the new 5G coming out, we never really got to talk about that. That could be pervasive and
it will be
it could
pervasive.
be very hard to avoid.
This is the one where we're talking about telephone poles in terms of further, how far apart will they be? You know, we're talking short range stuff here. Got to be transferred that way. We're talking about a lot of exposure.
Mhm.
Everybody being exposed, and we don't know. We refuse to examine what the effects could be. Anyway, we're treating ourselves just like we're treating New Yorkers. At the bottom of both issues is profit.
And I know we've gone a lot into environmental issues today, but I'm glad we have because they're very important. And on this, the 73rd anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima, it's always good to look back at the effect that nuclear power has. Well, I guess the anniversary is yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
of the effect that nuclear power has had both as a weapon and as a source of power. I mean, we live near 3 Mile Island.
Yeah,
We live within what, 10 miles of 3 Mile Island.
yeah,
We live in what is considered the fallout zone if anything serious were to happen. And it
yeah,
almost did back in what, 78,
yeah,
79? I forget the year.
yeah.
78, I think.
You're supposed to have an iodine pill in your pocket.
Yeah. And who knows? It could be part of the reason that I and several others in the area don't have thyroids anymore.
Well,
Living near radiation our whole lives.
you know, it has taken. How many times did we talk about Missouri? How many times did we talk about the stuff that's buried and that's in the fields and in the playgrounds and in the school yards of Missouri, near St. Louis,
Yeah,
from the production of uranium. Which one? You, whatever.
yeah.
Can't get the
I don't
numbers
remember.
offhand, but and finally, after all this time, there's a report out that people are actually getting cancer and dying of cancer. And I mean, it's only been obvious since World War II, over and over and over again from various things. But finally, now the uh, the CDC, what are they? The communicable disease people,
Center for Disease
Center for
Control.
Disease Control, has put out a report that, gee, wow, maybe it's true. These people are dying of cancer because of this stuff that's in the earth, and we got to clean up this stuff that's in the earth. And so they're going out there and they're scraping up this dirt in these playgrounds and whatnot that they find to be contaminated, and they're trying to make it fit for human habitation again. But I have two questions about that. You know, all these years and all these people with all these cancers, and nothing that can happen to them, they're just going to die. But the other question is like that radioactive stuff that they sweep up from the earth. What do they do with it? I mean, it's still radioactive.
Yeah, and sometimes you just throw it to the bottom of the sea,
Oh,
and sometimes you just put it in the middle of the desert and
oh.
hope no one finds it.
uh, so we've created a problem. No matter what we do, we can't escape from.
Yeah.
You can't just scrape it up and throw it away. I mean, it's not like taking out the garbage.
Mm-mm.
Uh,
So
Hiroshima,
yeah, and even more so Fukushima,
Fukushima. Mm.
in that we have just allowed it, and I say allowed because it happened, yeah, and we had the foresight to build a nuclear power plant, or the Japanese, or whoever, whatever, the human race had the foresight to build a nuclear power plant that was on a fault line, it was on a major fault line, and that was in a major area
And it
of
communicates with the
tsunamis.
ocean.
Yeah,
You know,
and right in a major ocean current.
yeah, right. So
So all these factors come into play, and yet they still decide to build a nuclear power plant there and just say, well, best of luck.
Japan,
But
of all places, I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
the place that should have an appreciation of the power of nuclear power. And I feel weird even saying that.
I feel weird saying that. I mean, the United States, for political reasons, dropped two bombs that they didn't have to drop on somebody that they didn't have to kill at that point in our history. And go back and review it yourself. We won't take the time to do that here. But they were already surrendering. The war was already over.
Oliver Stone's
And we
Untold
wanted to
History
send
is
a message to Russia. Untold
yeah,
History of the United States is a good source
it's
of
good.
that.
It's good basics, and
You
then
know,
undoubtedly there are more sources into which
yeah,
you can
that's
look
it.
more if you're
You know,
interested.
uh, but the fact of the matter is that we dropped two unnecessary bombs to show our power. I saw an interesting report that I call man's stupidity, that we will corrupt life on the earth by doing corrupt things, and dropping atomic bombs is a corrupt thing to do, and not only for the people who you're dropping it on, but for the earth, for life itself. It's an incredibly stupid way of looking at life. It's an incredibly stupid way of not understanding the value of life, the sacredness, the meaning of life. And we have lost all of the spiritual uh, stuff that life is about. We have no meaning for it outside of some kind of scientific notion that we have this percentage of that and that percentage of that and that percentage of that, and it adds up to $934. You know, that's the only thing that we know about life anymore is a monetary value. We destroyed the notion of life, but we don't consider what we're doing by using those kinds of forces against life itself.
Well, simply look at how long these radioactive chemicals and fallout from nuclear materials will last. We're talking in the hundreds of thousands of years.
100,000 years.
And that's longer than we as a species. Well, I think at some point or another we existed during that time.
We
But
got 10,000 years of so-called
let's
civilization.
say, yeah, let's go with 10,000. That is 25 times longer than we have existed as a civilization. And we choose to use materials and drop bombs. And these materials aren't nothing. They break down the very fundamental building blocks of life. They disintegrate genetic material. They break down the bonds and structures of life. It just perverts it. It just tears it apart. It is not a benign material whatsoever. We
Mm.
knew that. But we choose to use them knowing that we have existed for merely a tenth of the time that they will have an effect upon the earth. That's hubris.
I I saw one other report on RT on watching the Hawks. She talks about a tree in Japan, and at Hiroshima, I think they call it a ginkgo tree, and she showed a picture of the Hiroshima immediately or some short time after the blast, and you saw all these trees as skeletons standing against the sky. And the very next spring, the trees had blossoms on them, and she thought that it was a a very good story telling us that no matter how down things can get, that life can go on. Which
Sure.
I agree that life could go on. But one of the things that I thought about it was this: is that we can destroy ourselves, and it's not going to matter to nature. That nature's going to find a way to continue life after we're gone. If we want to bomb each other and kill each other and destroy each other through tar sands or however it is that we want to do it, life itself is going to regenerate. We won't have anything to do with it, and we won't have any part to play.
It will, but I still feel as though we will be clocked with the toll of mass species genocide for hundreds of thousands of species that we don't even know
Absolutely,
yet.
absolutely.
That it will be our responsibility
Well,
and our fault for their demise.
look,
But as you said, life will go on.
life
We're
will
not
go.
going to
Yeah,
destroy the planet. We
yeah,
we're not powerful
yeah.
enough to do
Right,
that. We can't.
right. We will destroy these orcas. These 75 southern orcas. We will destroy them. We will kill them. But somehow there will be life that will come out of that. What remains, you know. Uh, yeah, we can destroy ourselves, and we could destroy all the elephants. We can take away, rhinoceroses because we want their tusks for to improve our sexual potency. You know, all these weird reasons that we go about destroying the animals of the world. We can do that. And when we get finished and we ourselves die, nature's going to breathe a sigh of relief and say, now, let's get this thing going.
And as we've seen with climate change and with ocean currents, there is a process in place that will take care of us if we need to be taken care of. And it seems as though we've already jump started that process. And yeah, without a stark change in our methods and direction, we will be quickly on the way out. And not the Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk way out, but the what do we call it?
Mm.
The dance of fire
The dance of fire.
way out that will be much more unpleasant.
Oh, very unpleasant. Very miserable. We're gonna have a lot of time to reflect as we go. Oh God, what have we done? We have a lot of time to reflect on human beings and what we have brought to this game. And our period of reflection, is not going to be a happy time.
There are articles that keep asking why are millennials so hopeless and why are they focused on death? Well, they know the world in which they live. They know what generations that have preceded them have done to the environment. They know where we're at, and they can see the general inevitability of it all. So, what do you expect?
Hmm. So, boy, the one thing about my age is it's a good age to be.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to be young. I don't want to be growing up into all this stuff. I don't want to be my grandkids. I don't want to be my great grandkids. I don't want to have to face this. I'm a coward. You know, I had my life on this earth when the temperature was still comfortable and the rains came in their seasons. I had a comfortable time. I'm sorry. What we've done, as a part of my generation and the generations that came before me, we can't take it all the credit. I've seen some really smoggy stuff from the 30s, man, when they used to have these steel mills and stuff in these towns, and people couldn't hang their clothes out on certain days and all that kind of thing. You know, I've seen the pictures of California smog when the smog would roll in, and yeah, they had smog days and all of that stuff. I mean, these were the generations that came before me, but it's not like we learned something from it. That's
No.
that's the problem. Is so anyway,
So,
how are we doing? What time is it?
we're about a little over an hour in. I'm not sure what your time's like today.
I still have people down there working. I have to go and see how they do, but say three
Okay. So,
fifteen.
so
So
wait, how long do you have?
say 3:15. So.
Okay. So we got about 40 minutes.
Okay,
So we got to talk about Bangladesh.
Bangladesh.
Speaking of people who are still fighting, and apparently successfully so. But before we get to that, let's detail the entire situation where this bus in a nation in which 12,000 people a year die of traffic fatalities, and that is a big number.
Yeah,
I'm sure India is worse because they have more
India.
people, but Bangladesh is it's bad. It's very bad. It just lacks enforcement, and a lot of what the article said was corruption. So unlicensed drivers could easily get on the road and not know the rules and just do whatever they want, speed, etc., and not pay any consequences for it. And one of the things that these protesters wanted was stiffer fines and punishments for vehicular manslaughter. And what they did was they took it upon themselves. This group of mostly student protesters, young students, high school students, even, and college, they took it upon themselves to direct traffic and slow down traffic. And it was a big movement. I was in Dhaka, which is the capital of Bangladesh, and I think other places too, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken. But it was widespread, and they were doing nothing except trying to get a rein on the terrible traffic conditions that exist within Bangladesh and just take that step. They weren't even necessarily trying to destroy anything until the student wing of the government came at them and incited them to violence.
Now, who is this? Who came after them?
Oh, I had the name,
Okay, but I mean,
but it was the student
just
wing of the Bangladeshi government, something that was fondly referred to by Bangladeshis as the Hitler Youth of
okay.
Bangladesh.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. These kids, they actually belong to some kind of youth groups that is controlled by a I would call it fascist government. I mean, they're used actually as weapons by the government. They actually do the bidding and violent bidding of the government. They actually wear hoods and they act like thugs for the government,
Mhm.
and they come out as hooded thugs to beat up people who are asking that they not be killed by buses.
Mhm.
Wow,
Violent clashes, just beatings,
they intend to beat them
killings,
up.
rapes.
But they work for the government.
Mhm.
That's the thing.
It's telling.
That yeah.
And this went on for, oh, Um, at least 7 or 8 days. I believe it started on the 27th. 31, somewhere in there. It's 8 or 9 days. It went on, and this violence was just continuing, and it just you hear more about it day by day. And they shut down mobile internet, they shut down social media, and they jailed one very prominent reporter for a week throughout this whole process. What's
The government shut down the internet.
Yeah, oh, the government did. Absolutely. Let me
The
see. Let
government
me get
shut
his
down
name.
social media. The government tried to destroy the ability of thousands of students to communicate with each other.
His name is Shahidul Alam, and he was a vocal opponent of the government for many years. This government's been in place for 9 years,
Mm.
and maybe it's been bad for longer than that. I don't know enough about Bangladesh to say, but he's been a vocal opponent, and he posted on this. He produced stories about this, and they came to his home and they took him and they just detained him. At first, no one knew where he went in that sort of way that people disappear in repressive governments. But then a story came out that he was being detained for 7 days throughout the extent of this protest.
Repressive governments, including our own. But go ahead,
Oh, hey,
yes.
hey, I'm not saying.
No, I'm just saying we make people
Yeah. Oh,
disappear.
yeah.
Yeah,
And this wasn't anywhere. This was covered nowhere. This got no coverage.
right.
Major media or even the minor media. Democracy Now! Only got this story like a day ago
Yes,
that I checked there when this was actually going on, but
right,
they didn't actually post the story until this was over.
right.
The Intercept, which I consider a great news source, didn't have anything about this.
The Indian newspapers or the papers from the region.
Yeah,
That's where you
they
had the
did.
story.
They
Yeah.
definitely did. Not Bangladeshi papers.
No, not Bangladesh, but Indian. Yeah, I mean, but and other Israel too. Believe it or not. And Israel, interesting enough, had the newspapers had stories about the Jews, which we'll come to later. But I find it very interesting when you start looking at those kinds of sources. You could be on the other side and still publish stuff. Uh,
Absolutely. But there was a resolution. It came that they were going to institute a 5 year maximum penalty for vehicular manslaughter. That's still low,
that's
isn't
very
it? That
low.
still feels low. But apparently there was none before or very little, which is crazy to me that that leads people to just drive however they want and feel free to just kill people on the road because they won't be punished. I don't know. Maybe don't vehicularly manslaughter people because you don't want to kill people. I don't know. That sounds reasonable to me.
I don't know which comes first. You know, the fact that you're killing people and uh, you know have control over. Oh well, okay, that's just the way it is. Uh, and you begin as a nation to see it that way, or that you can kill people because there is no penalty. You know, I think you kill people and then don't create a penalty. Uh, that killing people becomes a way of life. Like in some places, shooting them up become a way of life. You just get those mores. You can drive fast, and then if there's nothing to dissuade you, then it just becomes the way that life is.
This is interesting considering that we live near one of the, I believe, the most dangerous stretch of roadway in the United States in terms of
The
fatalities,
Pennsylvania
which is, of course, State Street
State Street.
going from, it's on the
Oh,
hill,
from
that
the river
5 lane
to yeah,
stretch of
right,
State
yeah,
Street,
yeah,
right across the bridge up to Reservoir Park.
yeah.
That, in terms of fatalities, that is, I think, 3 or 4 times worse. And yeah, a lot of it came this year because
Hmm.
of the many fatalities that happened just this
Uh-huh.
year. But that also doesn't make it an invalid stat. Like that pretty much reinforces its validity that it's happening now. It's not some stat from the past. It is a currently very deadly highway.
Yeah, you got Roosevelt Boulevard like that in Philadelphia. People who work on one side have to cross to go to lunch on the other side, and there's nothing but 8 lanes of speeding traffic in between.
I think I've seen that, and it is scary.
Yeah,
I've driven on that.
yeah,
It's a lot.
yeah. Oh, it's rough, man. Yeah, and people trying to cross the street, but you got to care. You know, you got to care first, and then you institute things that keep people safe. But You can't institute things that keep people safe and then care. You got to care first, you know, and that's what's missing in Bangladesh is caring first.
Well, Bill, I think that's what's missing everywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Sadly true, though. Uh, hmm, I don't know.
Hmm.
I would almost like to save criminalizing diplomacy so at a time we can really get into it because that's interesting. It's a really
That
interesting
is
one.
very interesting, and I can I say one thing about us before we can talk about this criminalizing diplomacy later and all that kind of thing. But I want to say one thing about us as a nation before we go on, and about us in terms of corporate news and all that kind of thing. Max Boot, Max Boot is a columnist for the Washington Post. You know, interestingly, Max Boot, he was one of these guys who believed that there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. He was one of these people who thought that we should attack Afghanistan after 9/11, and then we should attack Iraq. He was one of these people who favored us going into Syria and convinced the Obama administration that this was their opportunity for generalship. You know, in other words, this guy Max Boot has been a warmonger who pushed for the changes in Ukraine, and who was an anti-Russian Russia phobe and wants us to go to war with Russia.
You know, that really rings like with the name that's like a proper war correspondent's name, Max
Max
Boot,
Boot.
just like Wolf
Yeah,
Blitzer
right
during
on.
his time. It
Yeah,
just sounds like someone who reports like this.
yeah.
Anyway,
He's never been right, not one time. But the Washington Post saw fit to make him a columnist.
I'm sure eventually he will be right. You throw enough darts, you're going to hit something.
Maybe, maybe, you know.
That's worth it, right?
And here is Professor Stephen Cohen. They were both on CNN of all places, right?
Mhm.
Being interviewed by of all people Anderson Cooper, who's not one of my favorite people, but who did a credible interview. Uh, and Tucker, he's another one. I mentioned him because he's not one of my people, but he's doing some incredible stuff. At any rate, I want to mention that Stephen or Stephen, uh, Professor Cohen, is a 45-year long professor emeritus on Russian studies. New York University, Princeton University. He knows about Russia and diplomacy and history and those kinds of things. And yet, somehow or another, we believe that Max Boot is the one who should be heard on Russia, and Stephen or Stephen Cohen is not the proper individual to talk to simply because he doesn't believe the narrative that's being put forth, and because he has said such things as, you know, I believe Putin sometimes, you know.
In this push to just demonize everything that Russia does and just to make any kind of interaction with what is continually referred to as a, even before there's any conflict, as a potential adversary. The idea that someone being a potential adversary should discourage any sort of communication or diplomatic notions is crazy. Because why, as a potential adversary, would you not want to head that off at the pass? Why wouldn't you want to talk before it comes something worse? Unless your goal is to have them as an adversary.
Your goal is war ultimately. You know, so what happens in a discussion like this is one man talks sense and the other man talks cliche. You know,
Got to spend money to make
you
money.
got to spend money to make money. Yeah, you know, you're a Putin puppet. You know, he said he made a statement that, for example, Ronald Reagan met with Gorbachev before they sat down and talked. And they met for 2 hours in private, and then they sat down and they came up with an agreement to reduce nuclear weapons. A guy like Max Boot refers to Reagan as a puppet of Gorbachev, as a Russian puppet, because he negotiated a reduction in nuclear weapons. This is the position that what you say he's a columnist for the Washington Post. This is a position that we are taking as a people, as a nation. That discussion of reduction of nuclear weapons means that you are being unduly influenced as a Russian puppet because you want to prevent nuclear war. We are in a very untenable position. We're in a position that we cannot now get out of. And as Stephen Cohen said, what we are doing is criminalizing diplomacy. The process of diplomacy, the process of talking. Anytime you talk to somebody, you're called a puppet or a fool.
And if we're
Treason.
being honest, even the current forms and overtures of diplomacy of which we speak are far from the true intention of diplomacy. That idea of meeting as equals, as co humans, and seeking to make accords and to come to a peaceful co arrangement, that is simply not, even when we engage in what we call real diplomacy anymore, the goal. The goal is to just make that power move, that power grab, and to just break any agreement that you make because it's in your interest and say, now we get a better deal or else. That's our form of diplomacy. And we're even trying to criminalize that.
Yeah. We would rather go to war with Iran, as an example. And in order to go to war with Iran, we're ready now to fight our European allies. You know, we just instituted last night or the night before last new sanctions against Iran. And the European Union, which is part and party to the agreements that were signed with Iran, are saying we should honor our agreement.
See, that was one of my hopes with Trump. I knew he was terrible in any number of ways, but I hope that he would at least stay out of these international
That's what he said. That's what he
entanglements
promised.
and agreements. Well, I mean, so did Obama.
Yes.
So that was my hope.
Yeah.
And he is, I don't know, there's something to be said for the deep state
The
and just
deep
being a
state
tool.
rules.
And if you know Trump, he is nothing if not a tool. So,
So anyway,
yeah.
I'm
Uh,
going to leave it alone for now. But that's a deep discussion that we should
oh, it
have.
is. Absolutely.
Okay.
And speaking of the criminalization of protest, Ahed Tamimi, our girl in Palestine, has been released.
Yeah.
And of course, coming from the family of activists and protesters. And yeah, she's free now, but she has been
she
imprisoned for the
she she
last eight
doesn't
to 9 months.
she doesn't call herself free. You know, she says when they are able to walk where they want to walk and go where they want to go and travel the world as they would like to travel the world, then they'll be free. You know, as long as they're being occupied and as long as they're in this concentration camp ruled by Israel, they are not free. She feels free from prison and she's happy to be out of prison, but she does not feel free. And she's right. I mean, how can you argue with that? You know, she is in the biggest occupied prison the world knows of at this time. You know,
Where they cut off water, or they cut off power, or they cut off medical supplies and humanitarian aid, where they control you leaving or entering, and any number of other things. And when they
everything.
regularly are peppered with shells and
Yeah.
bullets.
And it's not only that they control water coming off or on, they control, there was a stream, for example, that Gazans depended on, and the Israelis came and had settlements that have taken over the water source. They're not allowed to use the water source. and the sources of water that they have are contaminated. Only 3% of the water in Gaza is drinkable, and that tells you what the future of Gazan people is, of the Palestinians who live there.
Yeah. And
Slowly, they are poisoning
as you
themselves.
said, it's purposeful. It is a
Yes,
purposeful poisoning,
yes,
and you know, call it genocide if you will.
it is genocide. You can't call it anything else.
Yeah.
You know, how much time we got? Because I do want to talk about LeBron.
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Two things I want to say. One is I missed that walk this weekend. We had company on Sunday from Philadelphia, and I was planning on coming down there at 1 o'clock. You made that walk?
Yeah, although it turned out that we didn't walk. We just met in front of the Capitol, and there were 10 or 12 speakers, and they just talked for about 2 hours. We talked for about 2 hours, and it was really hot, and a lot of people were, I don't know, fainting and not feeling great. So we
Wow.
ended up not walking.
Uh-huh.
But we stood in front of the Capitol and, just protested, and they spoke for about an hour or an hour and a half, and it was good.
Hmm.
It was a good
Okay.
one.
I mean,
But it was a
we
95
remind
degree day.
people.
I get it.
We'll remind people what that was about. That,
Earl Shalik Pinkney, 2 years ago today, no, yesterday, 2 years ago yesterday, had an episode, a bipolar episode, where he got loud. He may have threatened his mom, but his mom said he didn't have a knife. She's repeatedly said that he did not have a knife. And the Harrisburg police responded. And from my understanding about what I heard at the rally, I didn't know this either. The cop took an air conditioner unit out of the window and pretty much sniped him from
oh,
outside.
get out! No, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Huh?
They removed the AC unit without anyone knowing or anyone's permission and used their laser sight. They sighted him up and just
And just killed him.
killed him.
Wow! In
And this
front of
was at a
them.
point where,
The mother was trying to.
yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
and she said he was already calming down. He was
Yeah,
already in the
right, yeah.
process of de escalating himself. He was,
And it's not a problem the mother wasn't familiar with.
no, he was,
She's dealt with many times.
20 years old, and apparently he was really sweet kid and generous and,
Hmm.
giving, but he had that problem, as many people do.
Yeah,
It's not an uncommon problem.
yeah.
But also, as many people in precarious circumstances have, it was difficult to get treatment for it. But also, bipolar in and of itself is
Yeah.
self averse to treatment.
And
Like,
bipolarism is increased, and I think that it's the result of pollutants myself.
I
Uh,
think that's part of it. Yeah,
you know,
that's certainly part of it.
I mean, why do we all of a sudden human beings are like more and more bipolar and all that kind of thing? And it's not
Yeah,
because of
and
diagnosis
autism,
and
I'm sure.
autism. I mean, these things are increasing because of things that we are doing to the environment.
I think in a way it is the awareness. It's just that confirmation bias. I think that's part of it. I think part is pollutants, but I also think part is the level of tension and stress that exists in our culture as well.
Well, I can go with that, but but also but you see early signs of it, from birth, and I think that it's happening in the mother's womb from whatever it is that she's ingesting, from whatever uh, insecticides, etc., that we're putting in our water, and so on and so on. I mean, it could draw this out, but I'm not obviously making a definitive statement,
Yeah.
but there's a reason that there's an increase,
Mm.
and it has nothing to do with human beings just being born weaker or anything like that.
I think both the tension and the stress in the culture, the chemicals, I don't know enough to say definitively, but I think
Mm.
there's a good chance. But also just the use of technology and how we focus our attention and television and screens and computers and just noise and distraction.
Mm.
That all has an effect on attention spans and
Oh,
development
yeah, our
and how we
interactions,
manage
sure,
our emotions.
sure.
And if you're not having normal human interaction for a big part of your early life, like it's not going to quite develop the way it should.
Yeah,
And you're not going to have
yeah.
that healthy emotional and social development.
Okay, here we have a result. Chicago's a result of all kinds of influences: poverty, non-education, uh, joblessness, and you get the worst weekend of shooting that they've had in a long time. But here in Pennsylvania, here's an incident of a guy. We have a cop who's being indicted, for voluntary manslaughter. One cop named Jonathan Rosselli. Now, here's a case of an individual who was off. Ain't no question about it. Donny Park. Somebody's in the parking lot jumping on cars and running around the parking lot, jumping on the hoods of cars. The man has a problem. Ain't no question about it. They call the police, and the policeman shows up. This man, his name is Joseph Santos, and the cop, he's a 44-year-old man with three children. The cop who shows up is Jonathan Rosselli, a 33-year-old 5 month veteran of the force. This guy jumps on the hood of his car. Okay, so the guy's crazy. All right, but the guy is unarmed. I emphasize that. The man has no gun, has no knife. The man is unarmed. The man is crazy, but he's unarmed. He says to the man, "Stop." And the man stops. "Put your hands up." And the man puts his hands up. "Get down on the ground." The man is slow to respond. He shoots him 5 times. The man dies. No gun, no weapon, no threat. You see it on the video. He did not charge the cop, at the cop, threaten the cop. He actually obeyed the instructions. He was shot 5 times. Reminds you of the guy who was shot with the taser just the other day, on the basis of not following instructions. Well, here's the guy who had his hands up and was shot. Oh, hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. Remember that one? Okay. But this guy is being charged with voluntary manslaughter because a district attorney, what's his name, Martin, Jim Martin, said that he had no reason to even take his gun out, much less shoot this man. He said there were obviously other ways that he could have handled the situation. If it came down to tasering him, okay, taser him. If it came down to hitting him in the head with your blackjack, okay, hit him with your blackjack. Wrestle him to the ground. But there was absolutely no reason to take your gun out. That's what the district attorney is saying. Even though the police chief had given a clearance to this shooting incident, saying that it was within regulation, was within training. The district attorney has finally, in Pennsylvania, right here in our state, has finally looked at a situation and says, no, it is clearly a situation where the man should have kept his gun in the holster. I personally think he should have been charged with voluntary murder, not voluntary manslaughter. But here we are, finally, with an indictment.
How about that?
How about that? Jose Santos.
There's been so much about Chicago, and it is a very violent city in that way. And we saw that with Laquan McDonald back
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
2 or 3 years ago,
yeah.
and we've seen it many other times.
What do you see in Chicago is you see a clear report. When you see the sections of the city that is having these problems, where 80% of the people don't have jobs or can't get jobs, where Ron, what's his name, the mayor,
Rahm Emanuel.
Clinton, I mean the Obama partner,
Mhm.
uh, closing schools, where so many people drop out of high school. We were talking about uneducated, unemployed, and underamused.
You
What I
got
mean is
you
that
got to keep those stats up. Got to
yeah,
keep those graduation
well,
stats up.
if you don't, if you have a culture of poverty and you have a culture of drugs, a culture of unemployment, a culture of not being able to do anything fulfilling or entertaining with your time, then those are the results. That's the result of a social situation that we have come over a period of time to understand. What is the response in Chicago? we're going to put 700 more cops. Cops ain't going to do it, ladies and gentlemen. And the people already don't trust the cops because of what the Chicago cops are. This is the place where they have these little secret places that they take people, talk about disappearing people. They
Oh,
disappeared people in Chicago.
I thought that was Baltimore
No, yeah, Baltimore too. But remember they had a warehouse in Chicago?
and Oakland,
In
and
Oakland. Yeah. Okay.
it's a
Now this is the
list.
kind of police work. And these are the kind of results. The results in Chicago is a result of a social situation that we not only know sociologically as a society, as a social work capable society, that the conditions produce those kinds of outcomes, but we continue to act as though policing in a military way is what's going to solve the situation. Now, we then have not learned and not earned any opportunity at success in Chicago. We're going to continue to go down this dastardly road, and Chicago is, again, I've said it before, is going to become more and more representative of America because we have a lot of enclaves where this is taking place, and we're not only talking about minority places anymore. Don't forget your highest suicide rates and your highest death rates due to opioids and all those other kinds of drugs that are involved is in your Rust Belt. It's coming down to your small towns becoming impoverished and representing conflict and populations of poverty cultures.
Oh yeah, something that I really appreciated about the event on Sunday was there was so much talk about the retraining of police and the demilitarization of police and just an entire changing of the mindset. But there was also the discussion of creating the civilian review board that had teeth, that actually
That's
had
the
the
part.
ability to subpoena, that could bring
Yeah,
people in
yeah,
and hold people
yeah.
accountable. But that's what the Fraternal Order of Police and all the police unions
They do
and
not
the
want
city
it.
council and the mayor, they don't want it.
They
That's
don't
power
want
out of their
accountability.
hands. It's
They
not
don't
even
want
just the police that
accountability.
don't want it. It's a
You know?
city
Yeah,
council. It's
of
a
course,
mayor.
of
It's
course. I mean, they're in. What happened in New York, for example, the mayor that they have right now, when he ran, he actually ran it about bringing in some civilian control over the police, etc. What happened when he became mayor? He found out that his police department could undermine him totally. You know,
yeah.
yeah, that's what happened in Philadelphia too with Mayor Street when you had a black mayor there, and they changed that when they got Rendell, and the Fraternal Order of Police decided to get along with the white mayor. You know,
And yet we see the DA in Philly. Oh, his name slips my mind right now. Krasner. He's actually making some effect. So it really is interesting, like where the power and the effect resides.
well, it's interesting because in Philly, what's the name of that party? There's a group of people there who are progressive. I guess it's progressive party,
Yeah,
uh,
makes sense.
uh, and they constitute a big enough energy flow right now that they basically rule. But you understand that the forces against them are still there, and this has happened before in our politics, especially in a city like Philadelphia. We've had periods in Philadelphia where those forces have taken over for periods of time, but they come roaring back. You know, the fascist elements, the right wing elements, the fraternal order of police connected corporate elements, they come roaring back. This fight is not over. And one of the worst things about this progressive movement in Philadelphia is that probably 30 it's a bunch of white people.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I know. Oh, I know.
they've got to learn to reach out for the long run.
And through direct action, another means to show that they really care
Yeah.
about other populations.
Yes.
You can talk all you want, and
Right.
they do. The words are there, but the actions matter. Getting into the communities, and not in an appropriating kind of way, but in a helpful kind of way, like
Right.
going there and seeing what help people
Yeah.
need and
You go
helping
eye
them
to
out.
eye. You go respect to respect.
Yeah.
You believe what's.
You certainly know, like, you see people like that coming in here all the time, and I'm
Mhm.
sure you can tell the
Oh
difference.
yeah. It's me. Yeah,
Hmm.
you know,
Where they just want a nice story to tell at church on Sunday, or if they actually want to help the people of this
right?
neighborhood.
Yeah, and they come here because it's a mission appropriate, you know,
Yeah,
or they come here because they care, and those are two different people.
it's easy.
Outside of building a school, and outside of guaranteeing that all the kids who go in there and graduate and want to go to college will be able to go, and outside of
Which is
providing
huge.
for
Free tuition for
job training and
uniforms, food pantry for the
for
family.
the family and jobs for their parents. I mean, just all these little things that he has done. And now, because he's done these things, we talked about last week how he was criticized on Fox News. Uh, he told that he should just shut up and dribble. Now we have the president of the United States, one
Of
Donald
course we do.
J. Trump,
Of course we do.
you know, ridiculing him. He saw the dumbest interview by the dumbest, what's this guy, Don?
Dumb lemon.
Yeah. Called him dumb for interviewing uh, LeBron. Why is it, and I don't have to ask this question, but rhetorically, why is it when you have a black man who is known and stands up and does something positive for his community, does he get shut down and ridiculed? Why was the FBI after Dr. King, for example? You know, why do we ridicule people for doing good things? Why do we try to bring them down if they tried to do something good for their own community?
Much like when Haiti gained its independence in the early 19th
Oh,
century,
yes.
and
Yes.
much like Cuba in the
Yes.
20th century,
Yes.
we cannot allow an example of either successful altruism that leads to the improvement of the black community in Akron, or successful socialism, or just, I don't know, general success in that way of a revolution by the native inhabitants and the slaves in Haiti. We can't allow that success to be seen and allow that to become part of the cultural milieu, part of the knowledge. It
Uh,
can't become normalized.
I'll throw one more other. That's a very good analogy into that. Pot is. I lived in Liberia, West
Mm,
Africa,
yeah,
and in the beginning, Liberia, West Africa was founded. Put quotes around that word by freed American slaves. Put quotes around those words too. In other words, we shipped American slaves back to Africa, and Liberia was the place that we shipped them to, and created our own African colony.
hmm
You know, uh, we said in this country we have a problem because so many black people are becoming free that it's hard to tell the slaves that they're slaves because they're black if they're looking out and seeing free black men. So we got to get rid of the free black men. Oh, I got an idea. Let's ship them back to Africa. So that's what they did. Now they had another problem. Suppose the people who are slaves find out that there is an African colony that's being run by freed Americans, black people who were slaves. That, again, if they find out that Haiti is free and being run by black people, if they find out that Liberia, Liberty, is free and being run by black people, it's going to hamper us in terms of convincing black people that they have to remain slaves. You know, so what did they do when they sent the black people to Liberia? They got the British to sponsor them, as if we had no involvement, even though their flag is red, white, and blue. you know, and the names of the counties
wasn't
is like
us.
American, is
That's not
American
us.
plantation type of architecture, you know, and the American ex-slaves wearing colonial wigs, putting into effect
That's
a
weird.
rewritten American Constitution. You know,
The
we're not going
cognitive
to.
dissonance is just remarkable.
Isn't it? It's amazing. It's amazing that you can pull these little stunts.
People buy it, hook, line, and sinker. It
Oh
was easier
yeah, oh
then.
man,
It was much easier
you can
then.
sell it to certain people even now. I mean, there's people who don't want to recognize anything different. You know, there's still people who you could tell them, they're dirty little Filipinos, and they still think that we're talking about MacArthur in 1933. You know, yeah, we don't have any different attitude about Haiti now. When we go down there and take their presidents and fly them out of the country to places where they can't come back from until there's a great deal of push, and then we bring them back into nothingness. You know, where we can go down there and collect millions of dollars for Haitian relief, and that money disappears. Mr. Clinton, Bill, where's the money? Uh, I'm talking Mr. Clinton. I mean, where is the money? Where's that all that money that he collected for Haitian relief? The last time anybody asked him about it, he said he was going to check into it.
He's still checking into
Uh,
it. He'll be back to you soon.
oh,
He'll look
okay,
into it soon.
okay. But we have a problem in America recognizing that other people can do well, other people can think well, other people can rule well, other people can do things and bring themselves up by their own bootstraps, and they don't have to love you in the process. LeBron, he said something about Trump a long time ago, not a long time ago, but he said that the man didn't seem to care about the people in his community.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that was motivation for him to do what he did. And now Trump has proven that he doesn't care about the people in LeBron's community
Well,
because he's
no.
criticizing them doing well or having the potential to do well.
Or for wanting to improve it, for taking that money that you earn, and unlike the Bezoses and the Musks and the Trumps, using it to build a strong foundation for community and for success.
Hmm.
I think particularly glaring is the counterexample that it provides. Trump, why aren't you doing that?
Why aren't you?
Bezos, why aren't you doing that? Musk,
Where,
why aren't you doing that?
what happened to the government that was instituted among men for the good of the governed?
I Trump, I thought you were a multi-billionaire, successful, wealthy, best of the best person. I thought that would be something that that kind of person should do. It's kind of telling that someone else did it first and they're far less wealthy than you.
Could you imagine this? Suppose that wasn't LeBron. Who was that guy who likes to throw those underinflated footballs for New England?
Uh Brady.
Bradley.
Brady.
Brady.
Yeah.
Tom Brady.
Uh-huh.
Suppose Tom Brady would have taken some of his millions and put them into a school for his hometown kids and promised them free tuition.
Wouldn't have heard a
How
peep.
would we talk about him?
Wouldn't have heard a peep, or would have all been congratulatory.
Oh man, they would have praised him like he was God himself.
Like he was a true white knight.
Hey, my God. Okay. I mean, that's what they would have done. Seriously, that's
Mhm.
what they would have done. I mean, there would be no end of praise.
Nope.
You know, they got to deal with Vanessa Williams. The mother who had this baby and came back and she's winning tennis matches.
Oh, Serena.
Serena, I'm sorry. Who's Vanessa?
She's a singer.
Oh, okay.
Still good, but
Okay.
different.
Serena, I'm sorry. I was thinking Venus and Serena and came Vanessa. I don't know, but
Yeah.
anyway, uh, the troubles that they have had, just getting recognized as two tennis playing sisters, and now she's had a baby and she's come back, and now Vogue magazine is featuring her to talk about postpartum depression. I mean, all of a sudden now she's representing all women who can come back and win. You know, there ain't that many women that could do what she's done, but now all of a sudden she's representing all women. I mean,
It's quite a mantle to bear, isn't
that
it?
isn't it though. I mean, that's Serena. That's Serena's thing, and that's not all women, but that's
Mhm.
Serena. You know, one other thing I want to mention before we go is Randy Moss, who stood for his Hall of Fame introduction wearing a tie. Randy Moss played. He was a wide receiver for 14, 15 years.
Mhm.
Played for Played for Oakland, played for the
The
Vikings,
Vikings,
uh,
Patriots for a year, a few other
the Patriots. Yeah,
places.
156 touchdowns, reception
Oh
touchdowns.
yeah, no, he's top five. He's got to be
He's really, yeah,
for receivers at
for
least.
receivers.
Yeah, he's up there.
He was quite some player.
Mhm.
He showed up and he gave a speech that had nothing to do with Black Lives Matter, but he wore a tie. And on that tie was the names of victims of police violence. You know, Freddie Gray was on that list. Remember Freddie Gray, y'all? He got beat up and was paralyzed and thrown in the back of a van and then killed on his way to the police station, basically. You remember him? You remember Hands Up, Don't Shoot. You remember I Can't Breathe. You remember Ferguson.
I remember the counter protest. I can't breathe, and the police wore shirts that says say I can breathe.
Yeah, yes, yes. Well, he wore a tie that listed all the names of those victims. Not all of them. You can't have a tie that big. You know, uh, Trayvon Martin was on that list, on that tie, you know. And he made a powerful statement. And he was interviewed, of course, about the tie afterwards, not so much about his introduction speech, acceptance speech. Inductee, I guess you would call it acceptance speech. But he made a big splash with the tie, and people were asking him about the tie, and he had an opportunity, therefore, to talk about the issue that the president thought that he had beat when he came out against the National Football League and the league itself and Jerry Jones and all those people who are coming out against black athletes actually making a statement of value. The question was, what are you going to do? How are you going to stomp them? And my question remains then, how are you? How are you going to stomp them? You can't stop a Randy Moss from speaking out. It's too late to control whether or not he stands or kneels. And you're not going to tell him to shut up and dribble. What are you going to do, America? Black men have a voice.
And you can't just blame it on Russian interference,
Right.
which seemed ridiculous and preposterous to me in the first place.
Yes.
You can't create these things. You can't create these problems. Just because Russia today covered them didn't mean that they instigated them. These cracks and divisions were here. These complications and these conflicts were here already. And just because a lot of other news chose not to report on it doesn't mean that you were reporting something false.
Fact is a fact. It's a fact. J. Edgar Hoover told us that Martin Luther King was controlled by the communists. And now Black Lives Matter is controlled by the Russians. One day we'll change our tune and look in the mirror and say, hey, that guy told us way back in 1893 that we had a problem with race in America. Maybe we ought to listen. I'm talking about W.E.B. Du Bois. You
But what to the slave is the 4th of July.
hey, yeah, yeah, yeah. Talk about freedom, ladies and gentlemen. We're gonna have a escaped slave. Talk about Independence Day.
How about that? But anyway, we reached the end of our show for today here at Reach Out. I want to thank everyone for listening and for watching. And well,
Hey, ladies and
have
gentlemen,
a good one.
please think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. For Bill Jamison, my name is Justin Geist. Thank you for listening and for watching.
Okay. What time is it?
20, 23.
I gotta